Okay, here we go. 2022. And you know, I think it's time we make a few changes around here. That's better. Hiya folks, welcome to the show. My name's the Gliding Gladiator, but you can call me Jake. And it's my mission to infodump about everything Disney animation on the internet. A new Disney animated movie is something incredibly special. With each new release, we are introduced to entirely new worlds filled with compelling characters and rich creative ideas that are sure to astound and delight us. Every new movie will be someone's first or will go on to become somebody's new favourite, and that's kind of beautiful when you think about it. Whether they become instant classics or end up falling to the wayside doesn't detract from how special each new release is, because we're watching a 4 to 6 year passion project that hundreds of talented artists worked on, all to entertain people for 90 minutes. And if they're lucky, have that work of art stick with them long after they finished their popcorn. Though it's been a while since we really got to experience an event like that. Frozen 2 released in 2019, and while it was a phenomenal movie about finding yourself and rectifying the past atrocities committed by your ancestors, and no, I will not be taking questions at this time, no one was shocked by how big Frozen 2 was, and pretty much knew a lot of what it had in store going into it. The last original movie from the studio was Moana back in 2016, but it was all okay because we were entering a new decade with a new original Disney film on the horizon. 2020 was going to be amazing. So don't know if you heard, but 2020 was not amazing for very many reasons. And while the lack of a Disney animated movie in theatres meant nothing in the grand scheme of everything else, it was still yet another aspect of normality that we'd have to do without. So after some delays, the newest animated feature, Raya and the Last Dragon, finally premiered in March of 2021 on Disney Plus Premium Access, which led to the film's overall impact to be rather underwhelming. Despite the quality of the feature, there wasn't that much to the marketing behind it, and as a result, the movie just kind of came and went, which is not the fate this film deserved. Jump ahead to summer, and things were actually starting to somewhat get better. It wasn't time yet for celebration, as we would soon find out, but things were starting to open up again, including movie theatres. And it just so happened Disney's next animated motion picture, which would be the studio's 60th, was on its way to the big screen. On November 24th, me and my friend Vicky made our way to the cinema to watch Disney's Encanto, a movie I knew nothing about as I had only seen the first teaser trailer, as I try and know as little about a film going into it as possible, so almost everything will be a surprise. And boy was I! I sat there mouth agape nearly the entire film, completely mesmerised by its visuals, themes, music, and characters. Which you can see in my video where I spent almost 10 unscripted minutes gushing about my love for this movie. And I was not alone, as it seemed everyone else who saw the movie fell for it all the same. Disney had once again turned out yet another masterpiece of an animated feature that felt like this huge event. And when they announced the film would be available on Disney Plus by Christmas Eve at no extra cost, people lost their minds in anticipation. And it admittedly did lift my spirits to see everyone hyped for a Disney animated movie again. But now that a little bit of time has passed and the movie has settled with most people, I think it's time to take a closer look. So is this film a wonderful miracle, or is this foundation cracked beyond repair? Only one way to find out. The film opens with a little girl talking to her abuela, who explains the story of how a special candle has gifted their family with a miracle. Long ago, the family had been forced to leave their home, as the girl's abuelo sacrificed himself, and in their darkest moment, the candle became magical, causing the mountains to rise, thus shielding them from the rest of the world, creating their own Encanto and generating a magical sentient house, Casita.
When my children came of age, the miracle blessed each with a magic gift.
We learn that tonight the girl will receive her gift, thus giving her a chance to make her family proud. We see the beginnings of the ceremony before the titles interrupt us. Jumping ahead a few years, we see the girl named Mirabelle is now an energetic teenager. She's voiced by Stephanie Beatrix, made famous for her role as Rosa Diaz on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and is no stranger to animation, having voiced Gina in BoJack Horseman. However, if you're watching my videos, you'll know her as the voice of Gosling Waddlemeyer in DuckTales 2017. She's awake before the rest of her family and is helping set the table as some kids rush up to the house.
My cousin's ceremony is tonight. What's his gift? We're gonna find out.
The kids then ask Mirabelle what her gift is, but she quickly deflects this, instead focusing on the rest of the family, as with the help of Casita starts our opening number of the movie, the Family Madrigal, which introduces us to the rest of the family as she wakes them up so they can head out for a day on the town. As we see, they spend most of their time using their gifts to help the community. The kids follow Mirabelle, begging her to tell them about the gifts, as once again the best comedy in a modern Disney animated movie comes from the child characters.
Just tell us what everyone can do! And that's why coffee's for grown-ups.
Abuela Alma Madrigal, voiced by Maria Cecilia Botero, is the matriarch of the family and Mirabelle's grandmother. She's the mother of triplets, consisting of Peppa, played by Carolina Gaitan, whose emotions control the weather. Next is Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno! Okay. And the final triplet is Mirabelle's mother, Julieta, played by Angie Cepeda, whose cooking has the power to heal the sick and injured. We're then introduced to the only two non-blood relatives, which is why they've been left out of all the merchandise, Mirabelle's dad Augustin and Peppa's husband Felix, played by Wilma Valderrama and Mora Castillo respectively. Next on the family tree are the cousins, starting with Peppa and Felix's kids. Dolores, played by Adassa, who has super hearing, Camilo, played by Renzi Feliz, who can shapeshift, and the youngest child of the family, Antonio, played by Ravi Kobat Conyas, who will be receiving his gift today. Then we finish off by getting the lowdown on Mirabelle's two older sisters. Luisa, played by Jessica Darrow, who has the power of super strength, and Isabella, voiced by Diane Guerrero, whose gift is to grow an extraordinary amount of flowers and is described as the perfect golden child. Now, when I first saw this movie, something about this song just wasn't quite clicking with me as much as the rest of the soundtrack. But in the following weeks, it did end up really growing on me, and now I appreciate it a lot more for how well it delivers exposition while also giving us some insight into Mirabelle, who refuses to talk about herself and keeps going on about her family. Yes, because she doesn't have a gift, as we'll soon find out, but also because she always puts her family above herself. And let's just quickly talk about the designs of each family member, especially when it comes to their outfits. If you examine each character, you'll see something that represents their gift. My favourite examples being Luisa's skirt, which is lined with weights, Dolores' dress has a bunch of sound waves on it, Peppa is wearing sun earrings, and her dress isn't a dress, it's a raincoat. Then there's the colour coordination, with Julieta's side of the family all having cool tones with pinks, blues and purples, whereas Peppa's side of the family is represented through warm tones such as red, orange and yellow, because they're all different parts of Alma. Mirabelle stands out the most because her dress contains the colours of every other Madrigal, showing both how much of an impact they've all had on her and how she is the best of each of them. Speaking of Mirabelle, she gets more and more nervous as the kids chase her through the town demanding to know her gift, as the song suddenly gets incredibly intense until...
What are you doing?
She was about to tell us about her super awesome gift! Oh, Mirabelle didn't get one.
And from here on out, this movie slowly starts revealing what it's truly about, as we'll quickly come to realise this perfect image the family tries to present themselves as couldn't be further from the truth. As one by one, they'll all start revealing their insecurities and how close they are to snapping from all the stress they're put under. We then witness how Mirabelle's attempts to help in any way she can to prove she still has value even with no gift are quickly dismissed and undermined by the rest of her family, who just want her to stay out of the way. The only exception so far being her parents, who try to get her to open up with them about how she feels, which doesn't exactly jive with her goal of repressing those negative emotions. Mirabelle continues decorating as she looks upon a bunch of photos of the family members getting their gifts. Notice how Alma is in the exact same pose in every photo except for one, Isabella's, foreshadowing how she is the family member who deals with the most expectations, which we'll explore in the second act. Then Alma finds Mirabelle.
The best way for some of us to help is to step aside.
And following that difficult to watch moment, we see the first crack in this family, as Peppa is struggling to find Antonio. Peppa is the only Madrigal who is physically unable to hide her emotions like the rest of her family. So her being the first one to disrupt this image of perfection makes sense.
What do you want from me?
Julieta somewhat confronts Alma, telling her to be nice to Mirabel because tonight will be hard for her. And like a lot of things, we're going to come back to this at a later point in the movie. Mirabel is able to easily find Antonio, who is nervous about his gift ceremony. As we arrive at the movie's first standout moment where Mirabel tries to help Antonio, but his worries don't all stem from the idea of him not getting a gift.
I wish you can have a door.
Mirabel gives him a stuffed animal, and just like that, it's time for the ceremony. As the entire town comes to the house, giving us a few fun light-hearted moments to balance out those previous scenes. Antonio is greeted by his siblings and parents who take no notice of Mirabel. Alma addresses the town, but right as things are about to start, Antonio freezes and looks to Mirabel, who is waiting in the shadows, not wanting to face the town. Then he reaches out to her. Despite her anxiety and trauma, she still steps out and walks Antonio to his door, starting to worry if the same thing will happen to him as everyone waits with bated breath. Antonio is given the gift of talking to animals, as everyone rejoices and enters his room, which is a lush jungle landscape. And here the movie gets just a minute of levity to show how beautiful and elegant it is before it all comes crashing down as the family take a picture, once again leaving out Mirabel. Soon as the picture is taken, time slows to an almost standstill. Mirabel stares at her family celebrating while being hidden by the crowd. As we begin our classic Disney I Want song, Waiting on a Miracle, a song where Mirabel accepts that she is not fine and wants nothing more than to show the family she is just as valuable as any of them. This sequence is pure genius. Having Mirabel wander through the house while everyone is stuck in place not only shows how she doesn't fit in, but that no one hears or sees her. And I love the visual storytelling that as the song goes on, she only gets further and further away from her family. And then the film decides to one-up Frozen by having the song end in an explosion of light and colour that puts the ending of Into the Unknown to shame. So yeah, it's a pretty good song. But then one of the roof tiles falls off and smashes on the ground, as Mirabel goes to inspect it only to end up cutting her hand. Then Casita begins to shake and starts falling apart, as huge cracks begin to form along the walls, making their way through each door towards the miracle. Again, we're going to come back to Casita and what I believe it represents later in the video. Mirabel goes to warn the family, but when they come to take a look, everything is normal. As everyone rejoins the party, Julieta is the only one to stay with Mirabel. She heals her hand and tries to tell her that she's just as special as the rest of the family, but Mirabel doesn't want to hear it.
Mira, my brother Bruno lost his way in this family. I don't want the same for you.
Oh, believe me, we're going to talk about Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno! Shut up. Mirabel goes to sleep but can't stop thinking about what she saw, and goes to check the miracle only to be almost seen by her abuela. Alma starts talking to her deceased husband as for the first time Mirabel and the audience sees a more human side to her.
Help me save our miracle.
And now here's where you expect things to take a dramatic turn, with Mirabel about to go on a daring quest filled with peril that will take her far away from home, causing the family to realise how important she truly is in her absence, right? Actually, no. In a surprising but smart move, there isn't any grand adventure in this movie. It mostly stays in the house as we just watch this family interact and work through their emotional baggage. Mirabel first decides to confront Dolores to see if she's heard anything. The next morning, the family are preparing for breakfast as Mirabel approaches Dolores, only for it to turn out to actually be Camilo.
The only one worried about the magic is you. And the rats talking in the walls. And Luisa. I heard her eye twitching.
So Mirabel tries to talk to Luisa only to receive some obstacles. We learn Alma has set up an arranged marriage between Isabella and Mariana Guzman, who we have caught brief glimpses of throughout the movie so far. Dolores tells them that he'll be proposing to her tonight.
He wants 5 babies.
Wonderful.
Also, I love the little detail of Alma plucking the white flower from Isabella's hair on the word perfect, as it's the only one that doesn't match and conflicts with what she wants Isabella to be. Again, showing how controlling she is of the family and their image. The family leave to begin their work helping the townsfolk as Mirabel chases after Luisa. And here's where the film goes from great to stunning, as we're fully introduced to Luisa, who, despite being the strongest, is the most gentle soul of the family, which is something we've already been made somewhat aware of. Jumping back a few scenes to when everyone was getting ready for Antonio's ceremony, Luisa was the only one to show awareness and concern for Mirabel.
I'm on it! Careful, sis!
Back to the present, Luisa is picking up a bunch of donkeys who have escaped from their pen, as Mirabel questions her and Luisa tries to keep everything bottled up, only to get more and more on edge as her little sister persists.
And it gets worse because you won't tell me what's wrong.
Nothing's wrong! Wow, sorry.
Cue our next musical number called Surface Pressure, which is all about how Luisa feels because of her gift, she is the only one strong enough to handle every family burden, to a point where she is unable to take any time for herself and feels that if she isn't constantly helping everyone, then she doesn't have any value. This has pretty much turned her into a ticking time bomb, and any moment she could snap. However, even during her big venti song about struggling with the entire world being placed on her shoulders, she is still always aware of her sister and ensures her safety, which also results in her not accepting any possible help. She keeps moving her out of the way as the rocks fall so she can't help lift them, and is always pulling her out of danger. Though I do love this little moment where she takes time to readjust Mirabel's glasses, again showing how caring she truly is. I don't think this song is getting enough credit for how brilliant it is. Let me ask you, what comes to your mind when you see visuals and colours like this in a Disney animated movie? To me, it feels incredibly reminiscent of Friend Like Me, or Zero to Hero, or In Summer. Songs that are iconic and do serve a significant purpose to the narrative, but don't really have anything to hide. They're catchy side character songs that are meant to entertain people. Surface Pressure takes that convention we're all accustomed to and subverts it, using it instead to explore the repressed insecurities of its focused character in a way that catches you off guard. Because we aren't used to seeing these kinds of visuals be used to express such complex emotions in a Disney movie. And after a brief moment of respite where Luisa dreams of having time to relax and enjoy life, she's dragged back into reality, and this part of the song is a marvel to behold. Just from the looks on Mirabel and Luisa's faces, you can see everything they're thinking about in that moment. The song ends and...
I think you're carrying way too much.
Luisa reveals that last night when Mirabel said she saw the cracks, she felt weak. Then she tells Mirabel that once she heard the adults talking about how Bruno had a vision about this exact thing, but no one ever knew what it was as he left before they could find out. Luisa leaves, telling Mirabel to go look in Bruno's tower, but to be careful. Mirabel sneaks past Alma and Isabella to enter Bruno's abandoned tower, only to find Casita isn't able to help her in there. And already we're starting to see some character growth for Mirabel, as she's being a lot more honest with herself and thinking somewhat of her own feelings.
I need to do this. For you, for Abuela.
Maybe a little for me.
After a bit of a tumble, Mirabel comes across a bunch of stairs. And we all know this joke that's been in every movie ever made, so we'll just skip to her getting to the top. So when she makes it, she finds the bridge to Bruno's vision cave has been cut. Keep that in the back of your mind because, yes, that is something else we will come back to later on. Mirabel swings across and barely avoids certain death. Entering the cave, she stumbles across some rats, which will be important later, and finally enters... Scrooge McDuck's money bin. Once inside, the door shuts on her, only for a strange green glow to start illuminating from beneath the sands, as Mirabel starts to pick up the shattered pieces of her uncle's last prophecy. But as she puts them together, the cracks begin to form again as Mirabel sees the vision was about her. No time to ponder that now though, as the room is quickly filling up with sand. Our heroine scrambles to grab the last few pieces and make a daring escape, only to run into her abuela. Then Luisa shows up saying she's lost her gift.
So I tried not to carry so much, but I realized it was putting me behind. But then when I went to throw the donkeys in the barn, they were... heavy.
Once she leaves in tears, Alma immediately begins accusing Mirabel, but has to leave to go get the Guzmans for Mariana's proposal to Isabella. Mirabel goes to the nursery to look at the vision, only to be startled by Pepper and her thundercloud. She quickly apologizes, which isn't important to the story, but a nice detail to point out as it shows the rest of the family do still care for Mirabel. Next, Pepper tries to stop herself from catastrophizing as Mirabel asks what would happen if Bruno had a vision about someone. Felix bursts in and starts to warn Mirabel about Bruno's visions. And here it is, undeniably the most popular song in the movie, We Don't Talk About Bruno. In this number, the family along with some of the townsfolk recount their experiences with Bruno's gift, as we quickly see a running theme with each story. Bruno says a bad thing will happen in the future because that's what the vision told him, and then when it comes to fruition, everyone blames him. And while the inclusion of the townspeople seemed unnecessary at first, I actually think their intrusion within the number helps illustrate what the real problem was here. Through the movie, we have watched Alma focus entirely on the people of the community, prioritizing them and how they view the Madrigals over the emotional well-being of her family. So it makes sense that when the people start to turn against Bruno, his mother would have turned her back on him as well, as he was now a threat to the image of perfection she has built, hence why his name has become taboo. One thing I took note of is that Isabella and Dolores' parts of the song are the only ones who don't villainize Bruno. Isabella mostly because he never had a bad vision about her, but Dolores is what I really want to talk about here. She is the only family member at this point who is much more sympathetic towards Bruno and understands his plight. Almost as if she's pulling Mirabel aside to try and tell her the truth about their uncle. True, it is also part warning Mirabel of the dangers of trying to understand Bruno's visions, but it can't be denied she clearly has a much kinder image of him than everyone else. It says a lot that even though Dolores, like everyone else, received a bad vision of her future from Bruno, as we later learn she was told the love of her life would be engaged to someone else, yet she doesn't hold that against him because she knows it's not his fault. And I fully believe Dolores and Isabella being the only two to give a more positive depiction was intentional on the part of the filmmakers, as they happen to be the oldest of the grandchildren, both 22 years old. Mirabel is 15 and Antonio was 5, so it has been 10 years since Mirabel's gift ceremony. So when Bruno disappeared, Dolores and Isabella would have been 12 years old, thus would have the clearest memory of their Tio. Louisa at the time would have been 9, but we don't get to hear her thoughts on Bruno as she's preoccupied with other engagements. Camila would have been 5, the same age as Mirabel, so he wouldn't have the most trustworthy memory of who his Tio was, which explains why his depiction is the most overtly villainous. And also because Camilo is just an overdramatic theatre kid. And we are nowhere near done discussing this number yet. I love all the Dutch angles during the hook of the song, which I think have two meanings. A Dutch angle is often used to create an unsettled feeling in the viewer and typically represents some sort of evil. But they can also be used to create a sense of distortion and communicate to the audience that something isn't quite right about the image, which is exactly what most of the song is. People giving this warped image of Bruno to fit the narrative of Pepper's mischievous brother who intentionally ruined her wedding, or the town's view of him as a destructive force who brings disaster and misery wherever he goes. And now we can finally talk about this film's staging and choreography of the musical numbers, as this is the last song of the film that features a lot of dance. And can we just give a huge round of applause to the animators because they have completely knocked it out of the park. As with all Disney movies, real life references were used to keep the weight and movement of the dancers entirely accurate. And it all just looks breathtaking with how much it all flows and the way the fabric of the dresses move. Every single Disney animation film just keeps topping itself with the visuals, as this is easily the greatest choreography in any animated movie I've ever seen. Then there's how each number is staged so flawlessly to evoke an emotion. And I've waited until now to talk about it because we don't talk about Bruno, specifically the ending is where it reaches its peak. There is so much energy in the short section as so much is happening on screen. Peppa and Isabella dancing together, Felix, Augustin and Camilo setting the table, and Mirabel walking by and glancing at them in the background. Yet all the movement is easy to read and never feels overwhelming because of how it's all been laid out. When Encanto eventually comes to the stage, and it will, most of the work has already been done for them, as this could all easily be adapted into a live performance. Not to mention it uses my favourite musical trope when all the characters sing the previous verses over each other. And then there's poor Louisa just having a mental breakdown while everyone else is vibing. And the way Felix sings Umbrella gives me so much life. We Don't Talk About Bruno isn't my favourite song from Encanto. That's still to come. But from a visual and technical standpoint, it is one of the best songs and scenes ever composed for a Disney movie. In less than 4 minutes, they pack in so much character exploration, subtext, expansion on the movie's main themes, and breathtaking choreography. The song ends as Mirabel regrets ever asking about her Tio, as once she puts the vision together, she sees herself standing in front of the crumbling casita. And because this movie is the perfect representation of living in a crowded house, Mirabel's father enters her room at the worst possible time and sees the vision. Augustin stuffs the pieces into his pockets and tells Mirabel not to mention a word of this to anyone until the Guzmans leave. And just to remind you, in a short while we will be discussing why these two are some of the greatest parents in the Disney canon. Not exactly a competitive category, but I promise you Mirabel's parents are amazing.
No one has to know.
And yeah, she's going to tell everyone, because when you've seen this movie over 100 times like I have, you pick up that Dolores hates secrets, which makes sense, as she's someone who hears every single little thing that happens. And again, this also does receive some payoff at the end of the film. The two families sit down at the table, and I love how Peppa has the exact same drink as the kids, while the rest of the adults have what I can only assume is alcohol. Because yeah, I could not even begin to imagine the disasters that would come with her being drunk. At the table, Mirabel stares down Dolores to ensure that she doesn't spill, as we again take a moment to appreciate the wealth of phenomenal facial expressions in this movie. A lot of the expressions and gestures throughout this film hold a greater historical significance to the people of Colombia.
When the colonizers came, indigenous people couldn't really speak in front of them in fear of being attacked, so we use our face a lot to signal. So when Maribel tells Toñito to open her present and she's signaling. When Dolores hears something that she's not supposed to, she goes, "Whoop." Also Camilo, we use a lot of like onomatopoeias and facial expressions and things of that nature.
And the second Mirabel's sight is obscured, Dolores whispers it all to Camilo, who has the expected reaction. And news travels fast around the table as soon Peppa's side of the family knows everything, then Julieta. And just when things can't get any worse, the cracks start to appear again. Now that everything is starting to fall apart, Mirabel tries to quickly rush the proposal before disaster strikes. And take note of that face Isabella makes, because not only is it amazing and wonderful that Disney are finally allowing their female characters a greater range of facial expressions, but like everything else, we'll be coming back to this later. Everything begins to unravel as the pieces of the vision get put back together thanks to something that was foreshadowed earlier on. Luisa's mental breakdown gets more intense, Dolores reveals everything to the rest of the family, and Alma sees the vision, but hey! At least everyone can see the cracks now. Isabella breaks Mariano's nose, and the family continues to implode. Still went better than most of my family dinners. Mirabel notices the rats carrying the vision away and chases after them, finding a secret passage behind a painting and entering the crawl space between the walls. Then Mirabel sees Bruno, who quickly flees, as she gives chase only to end up falling into a pit. Bruno grabs her hand only to end up falling in himself, but the pit turns out to be not very pitiful, so they're both fine. And now we can finally be fully introduced to Bruno, played by John Leguizamo, who has been in too many things to count, but none of that will matter once I tell you he plays Sid in Ice Age. Though this isn't the first time we've seen him in the movie, as he did appear in the background jamming to his own diss track a few scenes back. Mirabel questions her incredibly superstitious relative as we learn he's been secretly repairing the cracks. He takes Mirabel to his room as she questions why he left without leaving, which he quickly deflects. And if it wasn't already clear enough that the third act of this movie will have you bawling your eyes out, it definitely is now.
Yeah, my gift wasn't helping the family. But I love my family, you know?
Mirabelle asks why she was in the vision, begging him to tell her if she's hurting the family and should stop, but he doesn't have the answer. He had his vision the night of Mirabelle's gift ceremony at the request of his mother.
But the vision was different. It would change. Like your future was undecided.
And so, because he knew how everyone would react, he destroyed the prophecy and left his tower, which is why the bridge was destroyed, so no one could get into his cave and see the vision, which they would undoubtedly use to ostracize Mirabelle the same way they ostracized him. And Mirabelle is having a difficult time processing this.
You left to protect me?
Mirabelle has spent the last decade never thinking of herself and only of the family, constantly trying to prove her worth to them and always putting them first no matter what. So she can't even fathom the idea of someone putting her first. Mirabelle gets the idea for Bruno to have another vision so that she can learn more and hopefully figure out what to do to save the magic. Only problem is they need a wide open space for that, and Mirabelle's earlier escapade ruined Bruno's vision cave, which has now been turned into Anakin Skywalker's personal hell.
This is my room. The rats told me everything.
The next day, a storm is quickly approaching Encanto as tensions are still high within the family. Now we can finally start addressing the long list of things I said we'd come back to later, starting with Augustin and Julieta.
Think of the family.
I was thinking of my daughter.
Not only are these two incredibly attentive and loving parents to Mirabelle, throughout the movie they never back down to Alma and always stick up for their daughter, even if it means having to protect her from the rest of the family. In Antonio's room, Bruno is making the preparations as the house is starting to shake again. Antonio gives Bruno the plush Mirabelle gifted to him before the ceremony to calm his nerves, as these three are now officially the most wholesome trio of the family. The vision begins, and another side note, I love how in this movie, lime green is used to represent the heroes in both Bruno's eyes and Mirabelle's glasses, as historically this company has exclusively used that colour to represent their villains. But since those have gone the way of the dodo in recent years, I guess there was no use keeping that rule around anymore. Mirabelle sees the image of a golden butterfly as she and Bruno follow it, where they find a new piece of the vision, where the candle is glowing brighter than ever, and it seems to be because Mirabelle is hugging Isabella. Mirabelle is confused because Isabella would never hug her, especially after what happened last night, getting more and more angry until Bruno finally gets through to her.
The fate of the family, it's not up to her. You're exactly what this family needs. You just have to see it.
Bruno leaves and I can't.
After I saved the miracle, I'm bringing you home.
Time is running out as the candle is flickering as the rest of the family's gifts are out of control. Mirabelle relents and awkwardly enters Isabella's room, saying she's ready to be a better sister. But the golden child is not amused. And up until now, it has been very easy to hate Isabella. In fact, I'm fairly sure the filmmakers wanted you to hate Isabella. Well, enjoy it while you can, folks, because it won't last much longer. The sisters begin to argue as Isabella expresses anger at the fact she has been stuck being perfect her entire life. And then the truth comes out.
I never wanted to marry him! I was doing it for the family!
And we've made it to my favourite track in the movie, What Else Can I Do? A song that so perfectly encapsulates the power musical numbers can have when used effectively. It centres around Isabella suddenly realising her powers aren't just limited to roses and blossoms. Something she has never known because she was never allowed the freedom to experiment with her gift, as she's been forced to fit the mould her abuela wanted, and as a result, I imagine she doesn't get to have intense emotions. Up until now, even when she's happy, it's all very controlled to keep up that image. So in her burst of anger, she creates a cactus and is utterly stunned by it. And as soon as she starts to see her potential, she gives in to her desire and just starts going crazy in this beautiful explosion of self-expression, shattering the display she's always had to hide behind and liberating herself to feel true joy for the first time. The vibrant bursts of colour as Isabella lets loose to be who she wants and create things that express how she feels, which raises her to the roof and eventually sees her breaking through the house. And during this, her and Mirabelle start to mend their fractured relationship. And in a great callback to the breakfast scene where Alma picked the odd flower from her hair, Isabella begins to paint her dress as her movements become more energetic and carefree, Mirabelle encouraging her all the while. And here's where you really understand the importance of Mirabelle and why she wasn't given a gift. Because there was no chance of her ever being what Alma wanted, she would be the only one who could break the generational curse and encourage her family to start living their lives for themselves so they can be happy. Mirabelle is needed because she reminded the Madrigals of their humanity so they could stop trying to live this lie they've been raised to take part in. She's the only one who could tell Luisa she needs to stop trying to carry the weight of the world by herself, and the only one who could bring warmth and colour into Isabella's life because the rest of the family either aren't aware of these issues or are too afraid of Alma. Casita saw what those expectations did to Bruno and sent Mirabelle to save the rest of her family from the same fate. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. The song ends with Mirabelle and Isabella embracing as the candle glows brighter than ever and the cracks start to disappear. Alma arrives as Mirabelle tries to explain everything and how she just saved the magic, but she doesn't want to hear it and starts blaming Mirabelle for everything as the rest of the family gather around.
Bruno left because of you. Luisa's losing her powers. Isabella's out of control because of you.
The colour disappears and the cracks begin to re-emerge as Mirabelle has had enough.
You're the one that doesn't care. You're the one breaking our home.
Don't you
The
ever...
miracle is dying because of you.
And we're going to take a quick break right here to talk about Casita, who is not only an innovative idea that could only be done through the medium of animation with how much personality they give a building, but is also a representation of the state of the family. Casita is just as much a member of the Madrigal family as anyone else. Like Mirabelle, they spend a majority of their screen time helping their family, yet no one else seems to appreciate them. Mirabelle is really the only one who directly talks to Casita throughout the movie, creating a connection between them. Going back to that whole representation of the relationship of the family thing, the cracks began to appear only after Mirabelle acknowledged her repressed feelings and could no longer ignore that her family had serious problems. Something no one else was willing to consider, hence why they're unable to see the cracks. However, Alma seems aware that there is an issue, as she does initially believe Mirabelle as shown by the scene where she talks to her late husband. The more and more Mirabelle explores her family and learns about Bruno and how he was treated, the more unstable Casita becomes. Then we have the botched proposal dinner where everything just builds until the rest of the family is no longer able to ignore their issues and thus can all now see the cracks. But like most families, they refuse to acknowledge their own shortcomings and flaws, instead blaming it all on Mirabelle, which only makes things worse. Then we meet Bruno, who behind the walls has been trying to patch up the cracks, but one person alone can't fix something like this. It's only when Bruno and Mirabelle begin working together does everything start to improve. Then we come back to the end of what else can I do, as only when one of the biggest issues with the family, Isabella and Mirabelle's relationship, is acknowledged and actively worked on do the cracks start to disappear. But then Alma refuses to see it like that, only seeing Mirabelle disrupting everything she's built. And that's when it all falls apart, as both the family and Casita crumble to the ground. Though even during all this, Casita still does everything to protect the Madrigals, showing that they all still love each other. And the very last thing it does is shield Mirabelle from the falling debris. While all this is going on, Mirabelle does everything she can to reach the miracle, as everyone else desperately calls for her to leave it and get out. Despite her best efforts, the candle burns out as Casita waves goodbye before the magic fades completely. Julieta finds Mirabelle and quickly goes to look for one of her remedies. Mirabelle looks at her family shifting through the remains of Casita as the guilt over what she sees as her failure begins to take over her, causing her to run away, leaving Encanto through a crack in the mountains which we saw form moments ago. The Madrigals continue looking for her through to the next morning, as we get a little moment of Dolores trying to listen into the distance, only to realise she no longer has her gift. After coming across a string from Mirabelle's dress, Alma finds her by the river.
I just wanted to be something I'm not.
Her abuela sits down beside her and reveals this is where the family were given their miracle. We then flash back to Alma's past with the next song, Dos Oruguitas, which translates to two little caterpillars, as we see the love story between her and Pedro unfold. Shortly after the birth of Pepa, Bruno and Julieta, their village is invaded as they, along with many others, are forced to flee their home. However, when they make it to the river, they discover they've been followed. They attempt to run, but Pedro soon realizes they won't be able to escape and gives her the candle from his lantern before sacrificing himself. Alma drops to her knees, causing the candle to glow and give life to the miracle, pushing back the invaders and raising the mountains to create Encanto. From there, we see her become more and more emotionally detached as the years go by. This also allows her to finally realize that she had been so obsessed with protecting the miracle, she had forgotten who it was for and apologizes.
You never hurt our family, Mirabel. We are broken because of me.
And with that, Mirabel sees the butterfly from Bruno's vision. The two reconcile now that they're being honest and open with each other. And I love how this moment parallels Alma and Mirabel's argument from before.
And nothing could ever be broken that we can't fix.
And with that, they begin starting to repair the cracks as they both literally become enlightened. This is now one of my favourite shots from any movie. I want this as a framed picture on my wall, but there's one more thing to address.
She didn't do this! Whoa! Whoa! She didn't do this!
Look at this overdramatic rat man. He actually went and found a horse to make some dramatic entrance and save the day. And again, this shows just how much the family love each other that Bruno was willing to face his ma again to once more protect Mirabel.
But if you're too stubborn to...
The trio ride home as the town celebrates Mirabel's return. I mean, we don't see anyone beside the kids, but they ring the bell, so that's something. The family reunites and addresses all their issues through our final song, All of You, where they understand the miracle wasn't a sentient house or some superpower or a magic candle. It was them all along. Bruno returns and everyone is overjoyed to see him, because Peppa was never mad about the hurricane on her wedding. She resented her brother for leaving, as she is the first one to embrace him. And it ain't just any old hug, she scoops him up. But poor Camilo is just confused.
Okay, so we gonna talk about Bruno.
Also love the return of the Dutch angle during the "we don't talk about Bruno" reference. The rest of the town shows up and helps them rebuild the house as we see Mirabel and her sisters are finally working in harmony, opening up about their emotions and helping each other discover who they are. This is the longest song of the movie because they have to give every single character at least one final moment. Mirabel finds Mariano down in the dumps because
I just have so much love inside.
okay, now the animators are just showing off at this point. He did not need to be that extra. So Mirabel sets up Dolores.
You talk so loud, you take care of your mother and you make her proud.
And that's why Dolores fell in love with Mariano, because unlike everyone else, he has nothing to hide. He never lies about how he feels and is a sensitive soul. The house is finished as we see just how much has changed for the Madrigals. The family present Mirabel with her very own doorknob. Mirabel pauses as Antonio takes her by the arm and leads her to the door, perfectly mirroring how she helped him to his door during his ceremony. And yes, this is about the 12th time I was openly weeping in the theatre. As Mirabel approaches the door and the rest of the family let her know they see her and appreciate her.
What do you see?
I see me.
Mirabel puts in the doorknob and the miracle is reborn, bringing back to life Casita as now the family has fixed their foundation and have worked to become a healthier unit. Rather than separate doors, the entire family appears together with Mirabel in the centre. We're treated to a reprise of the song that played during Antonio's ceremony, Colombia Mi Encanto, as all the family's gifts begin to return, but it's clear this time things will be different. Luisa is being reminded to relax, Peppa's storm cloud is being celebrated rather than suppressed, And the film ends with Casita gathering the entire family for a photo, as we throw in one last little touch of Bruno trying to steady Mirabel every time the floor moves. Every once in a while, a movie comes out that for one reason or another just clicks. Whether it's simply a matter of being in the right place at the right time or doing something completely original, somehow everything just falls into place. No scene feels rushed or unnecessary. All the emotional moments hit their mark, and it all builds in this stunning crescendo that's a sight to behold. Encanto is one of those movies. Each song pushes the narrative forward and reminds us how powerful musical numbers can be when it comes to exploring the characters and revealing their innermost thoughts. The animation is some of the most colourful, expressive and satisfying you'll ever find in cinema, and its themes and message are timeless and poignant. It knows how to differentiate itself from the studio's past outings to deliver something unique and innovative that is still so distinctly Disney. There's no villain, no magical chosen one destiny. It's just staying in this house, watching this family interact and work through their issues and generational trauma so they can become better. Every single aspect of this movie was so meticulously crafted, and the attention to detail and emotional layers present in every scene is a testament to the talent and passion of the countless designers, writers and animators that brought it to life. One thing I haven't mentioned is the pacing, because this movie packs in so much into 90 minutes. There's Antonio's gift ceremony, Mirabel connecting with her sisters, helping to bring Bruno home and solve the vision, saving the miracle, reconciling with Alma and learning about her past. Any two of those would be enough for a movie, but they went and did all of it without ever missing a single beat, juggling so many storylines and characters almost flawlessly. It didn't feel like any character wasn't given enough screen time, and it says a lot that everyone comes out of this movie with a different favourite. For the past 2 months, I have been majorly hyperfixating on this film. I haven't felt this way about an animated motion picture since Moana, and I want nothing but the world for this movie. A Disney Plus original series, a Broadway adaptation, all the representation in the parks they can get. Whether or not that will happen remains to be seen, as due to the circumstances surrounding its release, the film had underperformed at the box office, and for a while it didn't really seem like anyone was talking about it. Then it was put on Disney Plus and the internet exploded. Everywhere I turned there was fan art analysis. For like a week after its release, a new Madrigal was trending every day on Twitter. It was insane. The online boom this movie caused has made me very hopeful for its future, as we may be looking at the first ever Disney movie that failed at the box office only to be rescued purely through online fandom. And that's just an amazing thing to me, because if any movie has ever deserved such near universal praise and celebration, it's this one. But hey, those are only my thoughts, and I want to hear yours, whether they be your own observations about the film or just how much you love Camilo. I'm excited to read them either way. If you happen to be new around here, feel free to subscribe and comment down below, as it helps me out a whole lot. Also, liking the video wouldn't hurt either. And as always, a huge massive thank you to the wonderful, beautiful souls Charles Dugan, Kayla Babington, The Wacky Deli and Andy Reacts for supporting me over on Patreon. If you want to support the future of this channel and me as a creator, you can do so by heading over and becoming a member of my Patreon, which will be linked in the description and comments down below. But of course, it's entirely optional, and I greatly appreciate every single person who watches and enjoys my content. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and I'll see ya real soon.